Identical twins attempted to get away with crime 10 times. Since they discovered they could, identical twins have tried to get around the law. Visual differences are frequently hard to identify. Due to the fact that identical twins are derived from the same fertilized egg, DNA is also ineffective. They share the same DNA as a result. Frequently, one twin will commit a crime and then accuse the other of doing it. Sometimes they simply won't talk and won't assign blame. This is one method that twins have used to evade the law. They are successful on occasion and unsuccessful on occasion. 10. Abbas and Hassan. Even though one or both of a pair of twins known only as Hassan and Abbaso were involved in a jewelry heist, they were not prosecuted. 3 men broke into the Kaufhaus des Westens, Katowice, luxury store in Germany early on February 25, 2009, stealing watches and jewelry worth €5 million. On CCTV, the men were captured. A glove was also left behind by one of them. Hassan and Abbaso, twin brothers, were identified by the police after obtaining DNA samples from the glove. Police were unable to identify which brother carried out the heist or whether both brothers were responsible. The men also never confessed. Due to the criminals' masks, the CCTV footage was useless. Even though the jewelry was still missing, the police eventually released both brothers. The brothers thanked the state for letting them off the hook after it was unable to pinpoint the criminals' precise identity. 9. Ebenezer Albert Fox and Albert Ebenezer Fox. Fox, Albert Ebenezer. Furthermore, parents had to distinguish between Ebenezer Albert Fox and the other children by fastening colored ribbons to their clothing. Unfortunately, the brothers were able to get away with most of their crimes because of their similar names. Never together, the Fox twins committed their robberies. In this manner, both parties could deny guilt for the crime, leaving the police uncertain as to who the real offender was. The brothers had so many encounters with the law that the police began collecting their fingerprints and using their scars to identify them. Research on fingerprint identification moved quickly because of the Foxes. They were the first individuals to be tried using fingerprint evidence in 1904. The brothers hunted and stole farm birds to feed themselves. They also worked legally, capturing foxes from farms and constructing a police station, among other things. Ironically, they were later held there by the police. They were convicted more than 200 times over the course of their lives, despite the confusion they frequently caused regarding their identity. 8. George and Charles Finn. During World War II, Charles and George Finn served in the American Army Air Corps. Charles flew a B-17 while George was a flight instructor. The brothers bought a C-46 aircraft from the Bakersfield School District in 1952 with plans to modify it for their new airline. Because the school district was not authorized to sell the airplane, the United States government halted the transaction. In order to hide the aircraft from the authorities after the brothers refused to return it, one of them flew it into the Nevada desert. The brothers were detained by the FBI after the craft was found. As a result of the witnesses' inability to specify which twin piloted the plane into the desert, a federal grand jury decided against charging the Finns. 7. Sadhis and Subrish Raj. Sadhis or Subrish Raj were detained by Malaysian police in 2003 for having 166 kilograms of cannabis and roughly 2 kilograms of opium. The drug deliveries were being made by the arrested twin to the residence where he was apprehended. His twin soon followed him home and was also picked up. When officers were unable to distinguish which twin they had detained for drug possession, they quickly found themselves in a pickle. The brothers weren't communicating, and DNA tests were inconclusive. The judge dismissed the charges despite the fact that the twins were on trial because she was unable to identify which of them was the criminal. If the rebellious brother had been found guilty, he would have been put to death. 6. Brandon Nimbard and Orlando. On the evening of February 12, 2011, a brawl broke out outside a nightclub in Arizona. By the time it was over, Sir Xavier Brooks, 19, had died from gunshot wounds. Orlando Nimbard was apprehended by police for the murder 1 month later. However, when police learned that Orlando had a brother named Brandon who was also an identical twin, the investigation quickly became more difficult. Although it would not have made much of a difference, police lacked the DNA evidence to link the brothers to the murder. Also missing was the murder weapon, making it impossible for police to obtain fingerprints. They could only be identified visually. However, witnesses kept switching between the brothers, making that unreliable. Some claimed Orlando was the shooter, others Brandon, and still others just remained silent. The case's judge downgraded Orlando Nimbard's bond from $500,000 to $10,000 after describing it as inconclusive. The shooter is still unidentified. While Orlando had previously been detained for burglary and marijuana possession, Brandon had no history of criminal activity. 5. Ronald Donald Smith, 2. Janai Coleman was shot and killed on July 18, 2008, at a train station, and her car was taken. Later, the abandoned car was found by police. They discovered a cigarette butt inside. Donald Smith, who had previously served time for drug-related crimes, was identified thanks to DNA from the cigarette butt. Donald claimed that his twin brother Ronald, who committed the murder, was the real culprit. Donald requested that investigators show his relatives the CCTV footage of the murderer in order to verify that it was Ronald. When the police did, Donald's family confirmed that it was Ronald. Several days later, Ronald was detained. Ronald was charged after his fingerprints were found on the car, and some witnesses claimed to have seen him near the spot where he had left the vehicle. He had also called people in the neighborhood on the phone. Despite his claims that the discharge was an accident, Ronald admitted to the crime. Nevertheless, he reversed course during the trial when he claimed Donald was the murderer rather than himself. Ronald's attorney later clarified that Ronald had helped Donald clean the car, which is why his prints were found on it. The jury rejected Ronald's justification, and he was given a 25-year prison term. Damian Fernandez and Darren 4. Darren Fernandez was detained by police in the summer of 2001 after breaking into a woman's home in the Boston neighborhood of Dorchester. The woman had heard the window break while she was awake during the break-in. She made a police report. When they arrived, Darren was trying to flee the house. He had hurt himself during the break-in but had not attacked the woman. When police checked Darren's DNA against their database, they found that it matched 2 previous rapes that had occurred nearby. Both times, a man had entered a woman's home while she was sleeping and sexually assaulted her. When police learned that Darren had a twin brother named Damian who might have committed one or both of the rapes, the investigations quickly came to a dead end, and not Darren. Due to the victim's accurate description of the tattoo on Darren's arm, police were able to find him guilty of the first rape. Even after Darren was put on trial twice, the second case was still unresolved. Investigators attempted to link him to the rape during the initial trial by asserting that he was present when it occurred. They were unable to demonstrate that Damian had not been in the area, so their attempt was unsuccessful. During the second trial, Darren had worked as a painter in a Dorchester home, and Assistant District Attorney Mary Kelly took the jury there. She then demonstrated to them how Darren used a ladder to survey the area and find his next victim. Even though some jurors found this to be reasonable, the case ultimately resulted in a hung jury. 3. David DeWild and Daniel. After visiting her estranged husband Dan DeWild's home in July 2003 to pick up a set of insurance cards for their 2 children and sign a check, Heather DeWild vanished. When Heather's parents called Dan DeWild to inquire about her whereabouts after she failed to show up, they learned that she had left the kids with him while she went shopping, which the worried mother knew would never happen. Dan DeWild was instructed by his twin brother David not to answer questions from the police when he was interrogated by them. Detectives thought Heather had been the victim of foul play and that this was not a case of a missing person. There was no murder weapon, though. Nothing on them. The residence where the police think she was killed has no blood. The brothers were both suspects in Heather's murder, but nothing connected them to it. Heather's body was discovered 6 weeks after she vanished by a road worker hauling dirt along a canyon road. The investigation eventually went cold, and Heather's parents began to believe they would never learn the truth about what had happened to their daughter. However, a new district attorney was elected 2 years later, and they turned to him for assistance. He started going through each piece of information methodically with his team. 8 years after Heather's body was discovered, Dan and David DeWild were eventually detained on suspicion of killing her. A shocking piece of information changed the situation for everyone. Before Heather vanished, the DeWild brothers had been seen watching TV crime dramas and forensic programs, according to the prosecution. When Heather filed for divorce, they had already started planning the crime. Later, David turned on his twin brother, confessing that Dan had killed Heather and had even recorded a crime scene reenactment. Dan DeWild received a 74-year sentence after being found guilty. David DeWild accepted a plea agreement in exchange for his testimony and was sentenced to 12 years in prison for second-degree murder. 2. Elvin and Yoan Gomes. A rapist committed numerous rapes and attempted rapes while prowling Marseilles, France, between September 2012 and February 2013. Police discovered Yoan and Elvin Gomes, identical twin brothers, thanks to DNA evidence from some of the crimes. The brothers were nearly impossible to tell apart based solely on appearance. When it was discovered that both brothers shared a home, a car, a phone, clothes, and a Facebook account, the investigators' confusion increased. The brothers denied being responsible for the attacks. The police didn't let them off the hook. Instead, they simply imprisoned them for 10 months until Yoan was identified as the assailant. His victims testified that the attacker stumbled when speaking, leading to his conviction. Yoan was the one who stumbled as a result of his hearing impairment. He expressed regret for not speaking up earlier and for locking up his brother. Elvin did not take offense. 1. Cooper, Tyrone, and Jerome. An unidentified 26-year-old student at Kendall College of Art and Design in Grand Rapids, Michigan, was attacked and raped one night in November 1999 as she was walking to her car after finishing a night class. Police were able to identify Jerome Cooper through DNA tests, but they soon realized that Tyrone, his twin brother, might have been the assailant. Both brothers lived in the same neighborhood and were listed as sex offenders. At the time, investigators were unable to identify which brother was the rapist due to limitations in DNA technology. After Dwayne McNair, one of another set of twins, was connected to an unrelated rape and robbery in Boston, police believed they had found a solution. Authorities thought they could identify the rapist in the Cooper case in Michigan using the same DNA test. Even though Dwayne was found guilty of the crime based on other evidence, the new DNA test was rejected by the Boston court. Unfortunately, this meant that Michigan might not accept the Cooper brothers' DNA test either. The cost of the test was yet another problem. The cost in the Boston case was $120,000, which would have consumed a sizable portion of law enforcement budgets. In that case, the district attorney's office and the Boston police agreed to split the cost. That's for now. We appreciate you for being here. View more our channel videos.